The tension inside Parliament was unmistakable. Mark Carney had just returned from Washington, and the air was electric. Every camera, every reporter, every member of Parliament knew what this meant. Carney had faced Donald Trump on his own turf and walked away standing tall. Now, as he entered the chamber, one question rippled through the room. Would that same calm, unshakable composure hold when facing Pierre Poilievre, the man who'd been waiting for this moment all week? Across the aisle, Poilievre was already grinning, confident, rehearsed, ready to attack. His papers were stacked, his jabs sharpened. He'd been framing Carney as weak, calling him soft on the United States, claiming Canada's economy was falling apart. The stage was set for a political brawl. But what Poilievre didn't realize was that Carney wasn't coming back to defend himself. He was coming back to teach a lesson.
The first words hit like a punchline. Poilievre smirked, then fired, "Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll go soft on him today. I know he's still recovering from surgery to have his elbows removed." The Conservative benches erupted in laughter, but beneath the noise, Carney didn't even blink. Poilievre continued, piling on statistics. 86,000 jobs lost, billions in investment gone, tariffs doubled under Carney's watch. His voice rose as if the sheer volume would make the numbers sting more. Then, silence. All eyes turned to Carney. He stood slowly, straightened his notes, and said calmly, "Mr. Speaker, there are 3 things that are true." The tone in the room shifted immediately. It wasn't defensive, it wasn't emotional. It was factual, deliberate, surgical. First, I realized long before the leader of the opposition that our relationship with the United States would never again be what it was. Second, we have the best deal with the Americans. And third, we'll get an even better deal because we're here. The Liberal side burst into applause. Even a few independents couldn't hide their smiles. It wasn't just an answer. It was a tone setter. Poilievre rose again, clearly rattled that his opener hadn't landed. He doubled down, accusing Carney of bowing before Trump and of offering a $1 trillion gift to the United States, calling it the most pathetic act of economic surrender in Canadian history. The words were sharp, but the delivery frantic. Carney waited for the jeers to die down, then leaned slightly toward the microphone. "Mr. Speaker," he began with a half-smile, "I'd like to inform the leader of the opposition that there is a thing called the private sector." The chamber exploded. Laughter swept across the room, even from a few MPs who usually kept their poker faces tight. Poilievre froze, his expression flickering between annoyance and disbelief. This wasn't just a comeback. It was humiliation, wrapped in wit and delivered with surgical precision. Carney didn't stop there. He continued, steady and assertive. "The private sector makes decisions about investing. And when the private sector has the best deal in the world, they invest in this country. And we will build Canada." He sat down. The applause roared. At that moment, it became clear. This wasn't a defense. This was domination. The energy in the room flipped. Even neutral MPs started leaning forward, grinning. Staffers whispered behind their folders. The political tide, for the first time in months, was shifting in real time. Poilievre tried to regain his rhythm. He launched another attack. "We have, by far, the weakest economy in the G7. 86,000 Canadians are out of work." But it sounded hollow. The anger in his voice contrasted sharply with Carney's calm precision. Carney rose again, unbothered. "Mr. Speaker," he said, his voice steady, "we have the best deal in the world with the Americans." He paused. "And we're going to make it even better. Simple, clean, confident." And that was the difference. Poilievre was performing. Carney was leading. But Poilievre wasn't done. He needed a viral clip, something to spin online, and he thought he could push Carney into a mistake. He waved his notes theatrically, accusing Carney of betraying auto workers, of sending Canadian manufacturing jobs south, of watching GM lay off 700 people in Oshawa while offering gifts to Trump. Then came his closer. Why doesn't the Prime Minister look those workers in the eye and explain why he betrayed them? The Conservative side erupted again, until Carney rose, slowly, deliberately. Mr. Speaker, he began, what this government is doing for the auto sector is an unprecedented investment in Canadian industry. He listed facts, not talking points. $5 billion in strategic funding, $10 billion in liquidity support, worker retraining programs, new deals with Europe and Asia. And then the dagger. We have the best deal already with the Americans, and it will be even better. The room went wild. Poilievre's face tightened. He looked cornered, forced to repeat the same tired talking points. Carney didn't just answer. He dismantled him. By this point, the Prime Minister had won over even some skeptics. You could feel it. The rhythm, the crowd, the confidence. Poilievre tried to land one last hit. He accused Carney of offering a $1 trillion gift to Trump in exchange for nothing. And then Carney, effortlessly, delivered what would become one of the most replayed lines in Canadian political history. Mr. Speaker, he said, pausing just long enough for everyone to lean in. The Canadian and American economies are closely aligned. And I gave such a lesson to the President of the United States yesterday. The chamber erupted. Applause thundered through the House. It wasn't a defense. It was a declaration. Carney had just flipped the script on Poilievre, reframing the entire trade debate from weakness to strength, from concession to command. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was teaching. Teaching that real leadership isn't about shouting or blaming. It's about showing control when everyone else loses it. When Carney sat down, the applause didn't stop. Members rose to their feet, a rare, bipartisan standing ovation in a chamber that's seen years of bitterness. Reporters later wrote that Carney didn't just win the exchange, he shifted the tone of Canadian politics in one afternoon. For months, the narrative had been that Carney was a soft-spoken technocrat, a numbers man, out of touch with the energy of politics. But that day, in front of a live national audience, he became something else. A leader who could mix intellect with impact, reason with rhythm, and power with restraint. Even Washington insiders reportedly took notice. According to leaks later that evening, senior U.S. officials told aides, "That man's tougher than he looks." The showdown wasn't just about tariffs or trade deals. It was a battle over tone, over what kind of leadership Canada wanted. Poilievre's brand was fury. Carney's was focus. Poilievre wanted sound bites. Carney wanted solutions. And in a world of noise, that difference stood out. Behind the scenes, political advisors admitted that Carney's performance had neutralized months of attacks in under 10 minutes. Polls spiked. Clips of the private sector line hit millions of views. Memes flooded TikTok and Twitter. Even critics conceded he owned that room. The next morning, newspapers from Toronto to Vancouver carried the same headline: Carney calmly destroys Poilievre in Parliament. And maybe that's what leadership looks like in the modern era. Not shouting the loudest, but standing the tallest. By the end of the week, political analysts on both sides agreed. The Conservative leader had been outmaneuvered. Poilievre's entire strategy to portray Carney as a weak economist playing politician had collapsed in a single afternoon. Because Carney didn't just talk policy, he embodied it. His answers were tight, factual, and delivered with the confidence of a man who'd sat across from world leaders and walked away with respect. In that sense, it wasn't even about who won the debate. It was about who commanded the room, and this time, it wasn't Poilievre. In the days that followed, clips of the exchange dominated every platform. Viewers didn't just see a political skirmish. They saw something rare: composure defeating chaos. Commentators called it the Carney effect. Supporters said he'd brought dignity back to Parliament. Even critics admitted he handled Poilievre like a professor handling a noisy student. The symbolism was undeniable. Carney had faced Trump, then faced Poilievre. Two very different storms, same result: calm control. That night, as Parliament adjourned, reporters shouted questions down the hall. Carney turned briefly, smiled, and said just 2 words before walking off. Lesson delivered. In a single session, Mark Carney didn't just defend his policies. He rewrote the story. He showed Canadians that leadership isn't about how loud you speak, but how steady you stand. Pierre Poilievre came for a fight. Carney came with facts, and left with victory. As Parliament's applause echoed around the country, Canadians began to ask themselves a question that would define the next election. Did Mark Carney just end Pierre Poilievre's momentum for good? Because sometimes, one calm voice can silence an entire storm.